The history of the prophets of the dark side has its roots in the distant past, in the bleak years after the end of the New Sith Wars, an era of despair, discord, and unrestrained hatred. The cult owes its emergence to the vibrant and extraordinary personality known as Darth Millennial, the fourth Dark Lord in the Sith dynasty founded by Darth Bane under the banner of the Rule of Two. There shall be two of them, no more, no less, a master and an apprentice. For, as is customary, one Sith is a great warrior. Two Sith follow the Rule of Two, but three Sith make an order of Sith with a traitor. The proud and mighty empires with their 1,000-strong armies, challenging the omnipotent Old Republic and the Jedi Order, were replaced by two grand schemers who were theoretically supposed to pave the way for the return of the Sith. However, in reality, they became slaves to their own egos, rapidly losing former knowledge and degenerating from generation to generation. The first in the dynasty of official heirs to the great and terrible who realized the utter depravity and danger of the doctrine of the Rule of Two was Darth Millennial, the very fourth Lord of the Sith in the order founded by Darth Bane. The man who entered history as the father of the prophet of the dark side was a mutant of human origin, marked by an extremely rare mutation. A third eye, located not where black humor would suggest, but directly in the center of his forehead. Vague remnants of half-forgotten ancient tales of pure-blood Sith claimed that in the distant future, a Dark Lord of incredible power would be born, marked by the third eye as a peculiar seal of strength. At a certain stage in his life, our cosplayer of Shiva became the apprentice of the mysterious Iktochi Darth Cognos, a Sith mistress from the dynasty of Darth Bane. Iktochi fervently believed in the infallibility of Bane's covenants, and in 980 years before the Battle of Yavin, she had every chance to continue the long-standing effort to restore the Sith to power over the galaxy as his official apprentice, replacing the mighty Dark Lord's disappointed Zana. However, the outcome of the duel on Ambria between Darth Bane and Darth Zana showed the aging Sith how greatly he had been mistaken in his former protege. The role of teacher passed to the blonde witch Zana, and many years later her position was taken by Cognos, possibly by reuniting the Force instructor in honor of old and glorious traditions. But this is not certain. Millennial turned out to be an incredibly talented apprentice. His potential in the Force seemed overwhelming, and his abilities in foresight and prophecy not only equaled Cognos's innate gift, but exceeded it, and all Iktochi possessed telepathic abilities. The three-eyed mutant, who, if he had lived within the galactic community, would most likely have faced negative love and adoration, gathered strength and carved his path to greatness. Darth Cognos couldn't help but feel elated as she watched her apprentice, eagerly anticipating the moment when he would be ready to challenge her. She imagined the day he would defeat his master, leave her cold corpse behind, and embark on a quest to find his own follower. While studying ancient scrolls, manuscripts, and holocrons of the Dark Lords of the past, the Millennial was astonished to learn that the Sith had once been powerful and numerous. Instead of hiding cowardly in the shadows and striking deceitfully from darkness, they built empires and conquered planets, trampling the Jedi's beloved friends into the dust and shaping the fates of billions. In short, they entertained themselves grandly as they pleased. Power was not their ultimate goal, but merely a means, a key to something greater. The Millennial discovered that the downfall of the Sith was due to none other than the great Darth Bane, a name he had revered for many years. Through cunning manipulations, this devious schemer brought about the death of Lord Khan and his Brotherhood of Darkness, thereby aiding the victory of the Lovers of Light in the form of the Jedi Order. The one with 150% vision shared his findings with Darth Cognos and was once more taken aback by the dogmatism of her views. The Millennial could not comprehend why his master rejected the logical and simple rule of the strong, which posited that numerous Sith should serve the most powerful one for the common good, in favor of the treacherous and misconstrued teachings of Darth Bane, which could repeatedly lead the few scattered Sith to their ultimate ruin. Disputes began between teacher and student, growing increasingly fierce and intense. Cognos persisted in her attempts to return her willful apprentice to the right path, while the Millennial futilely sought to appeal to her limited intellect. Despairing of reaching his stubborn master's mind, and realizing the futility and pointlessness of continuing his apprenticeship under Cognos, The mutant decided one fine day to break the vicious circle of servitude to a charlatan and a custodian, leaving the order once and for all. The Iktochi did not seek out the wayward apprentice, who had acquired a considerable number of dark side secrets and knew much about the Sith Order. A few years later, the now aged Cognos calmly took on a new apprentice whose name history is not preserved and, in the best traditions of cheap scripts, passed away long before his training was completed. The rule of two and the legacy of old Grandpa Bane were dealt a cruel blow, as the very first Sith taken on for training after Darth Bane's death became a renegade. Meanwhile, Darth Millennial chose to hide in the dark depths of the Cloak of the Sith in the Outer Rim. His new home became the planet Dromund Kaas, once the brilliant capital of the Sith Empire under the godlike Emperor Vitiate. However, the days of former glory and grandeur for both the Sith and this dreary world had long since vanished. The venerable bearded, many-eyed one was met only by cold tombs, breathless decay, and ruins. The spirits of the Dark Lords showed no interest in the arrival of Darth Millennial, but the duracrete slabs and columns of majestic fortresses and cathedrals, eroded by millennia, eloquently spoke of the great past of the Sith. In the past, when the adepts of the dark side ruled the galaxy and could impose their will on all those who were unworthy, and all of them in general, were lesser beings. In search of anything interesting, Darth Millennial delved into the endless labyrinths of the underground tombs and catacombs of Dromund Kaas. Coming across the archives of the former rulers of the planet, the unbearably talented many-eyed one began to study them meticulously. The holocrons of the Dark Lords, invaluable artifacts, and the philosophical works of ancient scholars such as Dak Remis revealed to him an endless panorama of the cold grandeur of the dark side in all its splendor. And then one day, while meditating, the mutant received a revelation. He understood that the forces of darkness themselves had marked him with their ghostly hand as the supreme prophet of a new, blessed path, destined to save the legacy of the brilliant lords of antiquity from destruction, and revive the greatness of the past in defiance of the hopes of the foolish followers of the rule of two, who condemned Sith culture to the degradation of their degeneration. Thanks to Millennial's fervent faith in his charisma and ability to speak convincingly, hundreds of followers soon gathered under the banners of the new faith. The spiritual sermons of the hooded, mysterious elder promising hope for the future were eagerly listened to in the Outer Rim, where hatred for the central government and the Jedi Order was as strong as during the time of the new Sith Wars. Some of Millennial's adepts were nothing more than naive puppets, disillusioned with the old gods and deciding to replace the accustomed dependency of the people with something more exotic. Or they were bored aristocrats with extremely strange tastes, though among the keen crowd of neophytes there was also much more dangerous company. For example, those not wanting to deal with justice, Sith apprentices of the Brotherhood of Darkness, professional killers from the Assassin's Shadows, and the mad Sith berserkers. For all these remarkably kind personalities, the new faith known as Dark Side of the Force became a true salvation. However, in the last couple of years of the new Sith Wars, the ranks of the latter two had significantly thinned, and after an attempted assassination on their persons, Uncle Bane and Zana were somewhat offended and further reduced their numbers. Nevertheless, it was soon that some of Millennial's spiritual, humble lambs found out firsthand that true service to the cult of darkness starkly differed from their naive notions of a better life. Of course, the Supreme Prophet could not allow the appearance of a potential threat to the dream of his entire life. So the retribution against all parasites, in the form of heretics and cowards, was swift and brutal. Under the banners of Millennial remained only a few dozen fanatics with burning eyes and hearts filled with the righteous flame of true faith. They were ready at any moment to lay down their lives for the sake of their brethren and his eminence. Darth Millennial ended a few decades after the founding of the cult of the dark side, in the warm circle of loyal friends, comrades, and followers. After they buried their spiritual father, leader, and teacher, the comrades of the late prophet settled in the central part of the ancient Sith temple and focused on strengthening the power of their cult. After several centuries, These plotters would emerge from the shadows and replenish the legions of the new Sith Messiah. The main distinguishing feature of each adept of the Order of Prophets, regardless of race, gender, or social origin, became the loose, shimmering cloaks with deep hoods, crafted in the image and likeness of Millennial's sacred garments. Male cultists, in imitation of the Great Father, wore luxuriant beards, and the few female members among the prophets stood out with their luxurious hair, evidently using good shampoo, as well as dark, gothic makeup. However, the tradition of painting faces like pandas, following the example of the Night Sisters of Dathomir, never caught on in the prophecies. Like many other sects fond of the dark, the seers used a complex system of exotic tattoos, which served as a kind of language for the initiated. As a rule, the prison tattoos of the prophets, deeply red or golden in color, were applied to the arm by a cunning witchcraft method of the Force, and in some cases even to the open palm. They communicated the rank, status, and merits of their owner, and the higher the owner's merits, the more complex the tattoo was. Unlike the vast majority of influential Sith organizations of the post-Rusan era, such as the Blackguard founded by Darnat, the dark side's prophets became famous first and foremost as gifted seers rather than warriors or hired assassins. The indisputable authority of the cult's patriarch, the strict hierarchy, and the mastery of executioners, always ready to demonstrate to the doubtful heretics the fullness of their misconceptions according to Millennial's precepts, reliably kept the cultists from the usual power struggles typical of the adepts of darkness. The emissaries of the Order often wandered the expanses of the galaxy in search of potential apprentices and lost Sith artifacts in a desperate attempt to preserve the legacy of the departed lords of the past from the guaranteed destruction by the failures of the Jedi Temple. While the legacy of Darth Bane occasionally found itself in the hands of deranged madmen, fanatics, and philosophers teetering on the edge of insanity, such as Darth Grier, who had the genius idea of importing some Jedi teachings into his order, prophets of the dark side accumulated power and might over several centuries. From time to time, some of them were employed as personal seers, spiritual advisors, or court attendants to powerful patrons, whether overly noble rulers of individual planets or star systems, or mysterious private individuals, which sometimes included followers of the Rule of Two. It is worth noting that for many centuries of the Order's existence, the smug members of the Jedi High Council on Coruscant never once encountered a single living or even dead prophet, remaining confident in the eradication of the Sith as a class back in the distant 900s before the Battle of Yavin. However, this was far from the first instance of the fantastical blindness of the greatest protectors of peace and justice, and far from the last. In 188 years before the Battle of Yavin, a group of Jedi discovered a strong presence of the dark side on the planet Almus, in the Kularin system of the Thyra sector. Waves of the dark side emanated from the ancient Sith fortress of Darth Revan. Despite Revan's bones having turned to dust long ago, the echo of the dark side still lingered around the fortress. Wishing to determine whether the ancient ruins posed any threat to settlers, the Jedi Order sent Kib Jeen and his master Khorne to assess the situation. As they approached the fortress, the Jedi were overwhelmed by waves of the dark side which echoed throughout the area. Khorne, an experienced elder, could easily resist the temptations and attempts to invade his mind, so he hardly noticed the persistent whispers of the dark side in his head. However, in Kib Jeen's mind, these voices grew more insistent with every step towards the fortress. Upon reaching it, Jin struck his master with a lightsaber from the back and prepared to embrace simple Sith happiness, asking the voice in his head why not. Thus, stepping over Khorne's corpse, the Padawan resolutely entered Revan's fortress. For the next few months, he remained inside the fortress, studying the ways of the dark side through the manuscripts and artifacts stored there. When Kib Jeen left the walls of the citadel, he was, as expected, filled with the desire for power. He wanted, if not to conquer the galaxy, then at least to become the ruler of that system, and then something even larger. But one person can't achieve much alone, so he soon encountered a large pirate band that relieved ships in the surrounding systems of their excess cargo. Using the Force to subjugate their minds to his will, The Dark Jedi not only saved his own skin from death, but also suddenly conceived the idea that pirates were an excellent tool for achieving power. Using the Force, a method of carrot and stick, he soon created a formidable army composed of various ships, thousands of pirates and other criminals. With his pirate army, Kib Jin became a major crime lord within a year, with whom the influential people of the entire sector were forced to reckon. The local authorities had barely been able to resist the pirate independence even before, but now, with a former Jedi at the helm who had turned individual gangs into a true pirate army, things were looking bleak. Did the Jedi know about Kib's fate? Of course they did. The Council sent the most qualified pair of psychometrist Jedi of the Order to Almas. They discovered the almost decomposed body of Khorne and learned that the Jedi Master had been killed by his own apprentice. It appears the Jedi didn't wish to enter the fortress itself. However, the Order did not take adequate measures to search for Kib Jin, which was a mistake, as the pirate army of the fallen Jedi soon began to terrorize the entire Thera sector. So, our guy ventured into those times on Dromund Kaas for some upgrades. Prophets of the dark side not only unlocked the limitless potential of the dark side for Kib, but also introduced him to other Sith organizations, including the secret existence of the Sith Lords of the Rule of Two. Unfortunately, a true inheritor of the traditions and entirely saintly Jedi was not to be. Darth Millennial's Holy Spirit didn't manifest in the form of the young former Jedi. The relatively peaceful nature of the Prophet's teachings did not appeal to the rebellious nature of the young man. Soon he left the positive cemeteries of Dromund Kaas and ventured to test his fate in the struggle for power over the Hularin system. Ultimately, the self-proclaimed pirate defense was met by the punishing hand of Jedi justice. Wounded, the former Jedi confidentially informed his former comrades about the return of the Sith. Two, no more and no less, a master and an apprentice. It is worth noting that Kib displayed uncharacteristic gratitude and nobility for a dark side adept, and did not betray his mentors to the Jedi Order. At a certain point, the dark side prophets established a secret laboratory on the moon of Dromund Kaas, Kalakar 6, used for experiments in Sith alchemy. In the 100th year before Yavin, the vainglorious Baron Yorn from Coruscant attempted to settle in the Temple of the Prophets to learn the secrets of the Dark. However, one fine day, every single member of the expedition vanished, and the Baron went mad, crudely amputating his own eyes and tongue by tearing them out. It is speculated that this incident did not happen without the helpful involvement of Konal, one of the most powerful and immoral adepts of the Order of Prophet, even by the standards of the dark side. Once a young prophet studied under the kindest wizards of Rand, the masters of decay and entropy from the depths of the unknown regions, thanks to a perfect combination of secret force techniques, a desire to feed vanity, and an endless thirst to harness true greatness. Konal swiftly rose through the ranks of the prophets. However, his attempts to reform the Order's dogmas in accordance with the Randist version of the Dark Path were unsuccessful. The only thing that appealed to the bearded elders was the bacchanalian orgies with young maidens from among the neophytes or just uninvited guests of the inhospitable Sith planet. Lord Konal actively supported the base instincts of these lascivious old men. In the name of the power of darkness and entropy, he not only allowed the prophets to love his own daughter Saris in various ways, but even personally participated in group acts of delivering her bliss. Subsequently, this lover of triangular headdresses was destined to play one of the brightest yet bloodiest roles in the symphony of Emperor Palpatine's absolute power. Meanwhile, the galaxy was rapidly changing amidst endless local conflicts, the depraved lifestyles of the corrupt senators from Coruscant, the growing discontent of the Outer Rim inhabitants towards the central elite, and the overall moral decay. The dark side prophets heard in the silken whisper of darkness a revelation about the imminent arrival of a benevolent man who would become the true embodiment of the ideals of the great Darth Millennial. Soon a person capable of controlling the galaxy as he wishes and purging it of despicable parasites would present himself, a person worthy of being an avatar of the dark side. The Force, in a hard rock style, hinted that this man, living under the guise of a modest and virtuous politician from an unknown fringe planet, was preparing to honor Dromund Kaas with his presence. Darth Sidious descended upon the surface of the ancient domain of Emperor Gestate several years before attaining the coveted position of Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic and killing his own master, Darth Plagueis. The bearded old men in dark, star-studded robes greeted the powerful Sith with all due respect, promising him loyal service for a long, long time, because he was the embodied Messiah, the one whom the great Millennial himself spoke of. And generally, what is the question? In exchange, they only asked for one thing: let Sidious's agents erase from the Jedi Order archives all existing mentions of Dromund Kaas and its inhabitants. Intrigued by the unusual nature of the prophets and their unique abilities of foresight, Sidious gladly agreed. Not even a couple of years had passed when the renowned Jedi Master Dooku, the same Count, became disillusioned with the ideals of the Galactic Republic and joined Darth Sidious. Before leaving the Order, he deleted from the Jedi archives the file containing information about Kamino and another 3.5 planets, one of which was Dromund Kaas. Shortly before the commencement of the jubilant gathering that went down in history as the Clone Wars, the elderly patriarch of the cult of the prophets of the dark side passed away. Konal coveted the coveted seat with the title of Supreme Prophet, but his ambitions were crushed in an instant by the word of Darth Sidious. Instead, the completely unhinged sorcerer became the personal creator of monstrosities for the Dark Lord. The new Supreme Prophet was Kadan, a former Jedi Knight who joined the sect of prophets shortly after succumbing to the dark side. Unlike the vast majority of Jedi, Kadan despised empty boasting mixed with heroics and the aggressive negotiations so beloved by many of the knights. The humble thinker and philosopher was far more interested in the nature of the Force. Disillusioned with the Council's stance and their views on the nature of the balance of the Force, Kadan left the Order and wandered the galaxy in search of the ultimate answer to the universe's foremost question. One day, the Force led him to Dromund Kaas, and the long-darkened ex-Jedi embraced the dogmas of the teachings of the dark side prophets. His apprentice, right hand and bodyguard became Jedgar, a potential peasant from the agricultural corps. The Jedi Masters deemed his gift of foresight to be poor and not particularly useful, sending him to dig manure somewhere in the outer territories. Anger, resentment, and humiliation quickly bent the youth towards the dark side. But a meeting with the wise mentor Kadan harnessed his natural fury and provided him a worthy future. During the Clone Wars, the prophets of the dark side officially joined the Confederacy of Independent Systems. However, the governments cared little for the insatiable appetites of Newt Gunray, for Wat Tambor's dreams of an ideal new order, for Durge's pleasing sights of heaps of Mandalorian and clone corpses, or even for General Grievous's thirst for revenge. Their loyalty belonged solely to Lord Sidious and his apprentice, Lord Tyrannus. Thanks to the government's support, the forces of the Confederacy under the leadership of Commander Asajj Ventress managed to give the Republic a thrashing in the Battle of Dromund Kaas. Yet the bold beauty's cooperation with the vile old men left the most unpleasant memories. Mother Talzin, the head of the Night Sisters clan from the cult of the Dathomirian witches, also held a rather skeptical view of the prophets. In her opinion, the remarkable abilities of the inhabitants of Dromund Kaas in foreseeing the near and distant future were nothing but clever and skillful charlatanism, intended only to swindle money from gullible employers, and certainly not comparable to the unique perception of the Force and its spirit by the Night Sisters. However, the witch herself could not foresee the outcome of her pitiful and laughable attempt to interfere in high politics. A pity, considering how much popcorn could have been eaten. Kadan achieved in a few short years what could take other beings many long years. In just a mere 2 to 3 years, he became the confidant and one of the closest advisors to the Emperor himself. The authority of the dark side prophets soared to unprecedented heights, though their hideout on Dromund Kaas ceased to be secret. At Palpatine's court, the emissaries of the prophets formed a closed society known as the Emperor's Mage, tasked with seeking out force-sensitive beings for subsequent training in the arcane arts of darkness, as well as predicting future events and interpreting obscure force visions. The high aristocracy still knew them as the Emperor's Secret Order, though beyond the name they were not privy to further details. Many of the Dark Jedi in Palpatine's service, Imperial Inquisitors, Emperor's Hands, or force-sensitive officers of the Army and Navy, received their training on Dromund Kaas. However, the prophets never revealed all their secrets to outsiders, likely to avoid any unforeseen consequences. Among the bearded adepts of darkness, one of the Supreme Inquisitor's jesters happened to be trained. None other than former Jedi Master Jarek, along with heroic ace pilots Niall Declan and Marek Steele. The first of them was destined to join the Circle of 12 and don the Grand Admiral's uniform in time, while the second was to become the Emperor's Hand. Typically, the recruitment of a future prophet of the dark side was conducted in the following manner. The Emperor's sorcerers, hearing of extraordinary abilities or exceptional achievements of certain beings, would approach them for a discussion. An engaging conversation between the potential candidate and a venerable elder or an enchanting young woman helped to better understand the views, desires, and hidden ambitions of the neophyte in order to facilitate their subsequent conversion. If the candidate was suitable in all respects, a prophet, on behalf of His Majesty Emperor Palpatine, would offer them several routine missions. For instance, the elimination of a few enemies of the state, sabotage or espionage. Upon successfully passing the trial, the Dark Apprentice would receive the traditional prophet's robe, a place in the organization, and their first tattoo, which would be added to as they advanced in service. Gradually, around the figure of the Supreme Prophet, the foremost of the gifted beings after His Majesty and Lord Vader, a select circle of the Order of Prophets elite formed. Included among the closest associates of the Holy Father were adepts of the Old Guard who had joined the Order long before meeting Palpatine, such as the one who had by then become the Supreme Prophet Jedgar, or the perverse Lord Konal, whose unorthodox training methods birthed several unique dark side warriors, along with new followers. Apart from Konal's daughter Saris, it is worth noting Jedgar's apprentice Wookiee Workin, a true nexus of mad rage and dark side power, as well as the former Dathomirian witch Marili, a cold beauty with hair the color of midnight darkness. Being the best of Lord Konal's apprentices, she surpassed her mentor in the art of dark vision and walking the streams of the Angti monks, but paid for it with progressive schizophrenia. Marili's abilities impressed the Emperor so much that he granted her dominion over the planet Kashyyyk. For nearly a decade, she ruled the Wookiee people through terror and fear. Naturally, the rapid rise of the Prophet of the Dark Side's power and influence could not go unnoticed among the officers of the Galactic Empire. Officers who trembled at the sight of the armored demon Darth Vader could not fathom why the Emperor elevated old geezers in ridiculous robes. Shortly before the Battle of Yavin, the prophets, who had decided to put an end to the frivolity of the fleshly officers, gained a deadly enemy. During a skirmish with the rebels in Predhill, one of the subordinates of the stern Grand Admiral Afshin Makati made an unwise comment about the robes of the prophet, who was accompanying their commander as an advisor. Ultimately, the Supreme Prophet Kadan found nothing better to do than to slap the annoying jokers with a bolt of force lightning, striking the blameless Grand Admiral, and mockingly advised him to learn how to better discipline his subordinates. The electroshock therapy did not sit well with the fleet commander, and he swore to take revenge on the vile cult as a whole, and the cursed, short-statured patriarch in particular. Since the beginning of the Galactic Civil War, the Order of the Prophets had become an important support for the Emperor's most loyal allies in the struggle for the integrity of the state, army, and space fleet. Emissaries of the Order engaged in reconnaissance and sabotage activities on dozens of planets. For instance, Saris became the personal advisor to the governor of Tatooine and a reliable support for his subordinates in their fight against the local resistance. Arga sabotaged rebel activities in the Outer Rim, and Konal effectively headed Imperial intelligence. However, Kadan was not satisfied. With the growing power of the prophets, he had to cede more and more authority to Palpatine, and his best agents became elite assassins serving the decrepit Sith Lord. In turn, His Majesty was increasingly troubled by the dark prospects of the future, as the prophets, in their finest tradition, predicted the destruction of the Death Star and the triumph of the Rebel Alliance. And after the Battle of Yavin, the Supreme Prophet himself informed Palpatine about the vulnerable point, in the form of the young hero of the rebellion, Luke Skywalker, casually noting that the brat would take someone important down. From this moment on, the search for young Skywalker became a sign of strange behavior for the Emperor. The former trust and mutual respect between the Galactic Emperor and the Patriarch of Dromund Kaas came to an end. At a certain point in time, the Emperor showed interest in the ancient methods of training Sith marauders, mindless and insane instruments of raw, unbridled hatred. He suggested to Kadan that he forge such a weapon for him out of a force-sensitive young man named Azrakel. However, Palpatine soon grew bored with this diversion, and the Supreme Prophet found himself with a unique opportunity to create his own attack dog for the subsequent seizure of power over the galaxy. The Holy Old One instilled in Azrakel hatred towards the Emperor and Darth Vader through force, the harshest tortures, and certain extreme measures. However, he clearly got carried away and nearly missed the moment when the child they had raised desired to lay hands on his own master. Shortly before the fateful Battle of Endor, the Dark Warrior Azrakel defected from his teacher and hid somewhere in the expanses of the Outer Rim. The last straw in the relationship between the Emperor and the Prophets was Palpatine's meeting with Kadan during the Endor operation. On the eve of his greatest triumph, the Dark Lord wanted to restore his former friendship with Kadan and simultaneously find out what the Force had to say about his grand scheme. When the Supreme Prophet conveyed to him the response of the high hierarchs of the Order regarding the restoration of the balance of the Force and the impending doom of the Galactic Empire, Palpatine simply laughed. However, the information that the chief cause of the collapse of everything arduously built was Palpatine's own boundless ego and lethality put the last one in a negatively blissful mood. He declared that the prophets were no longer needed and could leave, and sent his inquisitorious warriors to cleanse the temple. Nevertheless, the prophets of the dark side had prepared in advance for the most unfavorable outcome. As a result, Palpatine's enforcers were met with only the lifeless stones of a dead planet. Kadan and his most loyal followers found a new refuge in a secret temple on the planet Post-Endor, the coordinates of which were unknown to either Palpatine or any of his followers. Unfortunately, there could be no talk of returning to former times. The tyrant's death brought to the galaxy not peace and order, but chaos, anarchy, and fratricidal war, during which the once all-powerful Order of the Prophets disintegrated into factions that fell into the hands of power-hungry imposters with their doomed struggles for power. In connection with the death of the Emperor Palpatine, the disintegration of the Order of the Prophets, and the mysterious disappearance of Kadan, the surviving followers of the Order found themselves at a crossroads. Saris was forced to leave Tatooine due to the rebellion-instigated witch hunt, and shortly thereafter she came into contact with the Dark Jedi Jerick and became one of his closest allies. Her example was followed by Gork and Pick, the so-called Sith brothers, a Gamorrean and a Kowakian monkey lizard, transformed into powerful mutants by the unholy alchemical craft of Lord Konal. Marek Staley joined Suntir Fel's 181st Fighter Wing and later served under Gilad Pellaeon in the Outer Rim. Merrily became close to the theological scholar and protector of the Kashi system, Grand Admiral Pikati Sin. The most interesting and unusual contribution to the course of political events was made by Lord Konal, cunning as a Devaronian, better known in the wider galaxy by the unsavory nickname Black Hole. Being one of the closest to the Emperor within the entire Galactic Empire, Lord Konal, even during the lifetime of the beloved Palpatine, began implementing a series of measures aimed at transforming the state into the Emperor's true dream, a dark empire, a powerful theocracy of the dark side, following the model of ancient Sith kingdoms. For decades, having gained full control over the Holonet, Konal manipulated the worldview and moods of trillions of Imperial citizens, intimidating overly impressionable individuals with his version of the unforgiving, unforgetting anonymous figure, a 3-meter shadow glimmering with thousands of stars and melting eyes. After several weeks of successful disinformation of the Galactic Society through tabloid press and fascinating thrillers about Luke Skywalker, with the assistance of the whimsical Elder Randit, a more than original plan was brought to life. The comrades of the late Palpatine created a pseudo-religion called the Churches of the Dark Side, designed to confuse the minds of millions and millions of Imperial servants with propaganda about the dreadful rebels who eat Imperial children, and prophecies about the imminent return of the Messiah Emperor, perfect and invincible, who would crush the pathetic worms of rebels with a mere snap of his fingers and bestow upon his faithful subjects a millennium of universal prosperity. The new addiction for the populace was essentially a high-quality propaganda machine, diligently brainwashing the common folk. In the ranks of the Church's higher hierarchs were not only former adepts of the Order of the Prophets, like Konal or Saris, but also actors of the caliber of Jack Nicholson, and imitators among the ranks of the Imperial Security Bureau. The best among them was Maestro Bim Raja Ubuki, a theatrical actor and noble grand combiner with the appearance of a typical gnome, an ideal candidate for the role of Supreme Prophet Kadan, whose height did not exceed 120 centimeters. His faithful agent and assistant Heingort Giddis, a huge null humanoid, seemed a perfect replacement for the lanky High Prophet Jedgar. Ersatz Jedgar wrote a book titled Secrets of the Dark Side, where he presented the prophecies of his miniature boss in a rather unusual manner. In truth, few knew that the mirror to the upcoming dwarf was opened not by the Force, but by an extensive network of spies and informants, among whom there were likely many Bothans. As a kind of headquarters and residence for the Most Holy Patriarch, Konal's priests chose the space station Scardia, a cubic-shaped cosmic cathedral floating in the zero zone of regional expansion. Unlike the simple and ascetic rooms of the true prophets of the dark side on Dromund Kaas, the spiritual center of the entire religious life of the Galactic Empire was renowned for its stunning luxury bordering on extravagance. Giant shelves in spacious halls were literally bursting with all kinds of ancient artifacts and valuables, from genuine relics of Sith empires to cheap imitations bought from some vendor at a flea market. However, in combination with the opulent star mantles of the venerable elders, the aura of mysticism and prophecies that were incomprehensible but very interesting for further interpretation, all this ostentation served excellently as a screen for the true plan of the Grey Cardinals to achieve absolute support from the overwhelming majority of the population and at the same time eliminate any potential threats. Unfortunately, in real life, the implementation of ambitious projects does not always go according to the principle of what is conceived is done. Sin's Star Destroyer was obliterated by the forces of Admiral Akbar in the Battle of Kashyyyk. As a result of a military coup, Khurasan was seized by Izana Isard. Not long thereafter, Satay Pestage perished in the iron grip Admiral Krenel. Though few knew that the cunning old man from Sutric IV secretly made his exit long before the coup, leaving at the helm a loyal but comically ineffective clone. Lord Konal himself also disappeared along with his legionnaires in black armor from the last batches of Jango Fett clones. And with the gold-skinned Roxians, however, the goal was nevertheless achieved. The Church of the Dark Side continued to successfully brainwash the populace. It is worth noting that among the entire political elite of the Empire, only Pestage knew the truth, hidden from all those self-satisfied Imperial commanders and the absurd Dark Force users with their petty ambitions. Palpatine was alive. Having tasted a few sweet pieces of the grandeur pie, the actors turned Lords of Konal, in the absence of their boss's iron hand, intended to implement their own plans to seize control of the galaxy. From Coruscant to the very fringes, that Darth Vader's right glove depicted the paw of the fifth element and managed to survive the explosion of the second Death Star. Most serious people and exotics dismissed these rumors as ridiculous fairy tales. However, the false prophets saw in this myth their chance. His Holiness Kadan proclaimed before the multi-billion-strong flock that a new ruler would soon be brought to the throne of the Empire, and on his hand he would wear Darth Vader's glove, What neither the public nor the prophets knew was that this piece of Darth Vader's equipment was created based on an ancient amulet of unimaginable power, once belonging to Lord Skera Khan, the ruler of the Brotherhood of Darkness. For the false Kadan, the glove was nothing more than a desirable addition to an amusing collection of trinkets. But the Emperor, who had returned from the eternal realm of shadows, regarded it as a crucial element in his further plans to revive the Galactic Empire and restore its former might. As for how the true prophets, the proud bearers of Darth Millennial's covenants and the keepers of centuries-old Sith traditions, reacted to this situation, opinions were divided on the necessary retribution for the pathetic imposters. Burning with hatred, Jedgar planned to leave Bastion with a group of the most aggressive brethren and slaughter the bearded clowns to the last man. However, Kadan dissuaded him from this reckless move. Revealing themselves now would draw the attention of numerous enemies, and the strength and power of the cult were not what they once were. Spiritual brothers and sisters would have to don the mask of humility and patiently wait for the enemies of the true prophets to tear each other apart in a brutal struggle for power. Then the Order would awaken from slumber and finally have the opportunity to exact revenge. Meanwhile, there was a powerful faction of breakaway warlords and regional governors from the Empire, led by the toothy lover of dark greetings, Grand Moff Hissa. I'm referring to the Central Committee of Grand Moffs. So in opposition to the Isard, they elected the handsome and charismatic Trioculus as the new Emperor of the Galaxy, overseer of the spice mines of Kessel, and a pretender posing as the son of the late Palpatine. Even during the Emperor's lifetime, there were rumors about the birth of his mutant son with 3 eyes, who was hidden away soon after birth. Trioculus indeed had such a charming defect, but he had no relation to the old snob's progeny. Being no more than the result of nightmarish genetic experiments, his loyal aides, Sly Moore. Naturally, the rapid rise of the strange young man caused quite a stir in the higher echelons of the remnants of the Imperial Armed Forces. To silence the most zealous skeptics among the likes of Grand Admiral Joseph Grunger, Trioculus began the search for Darth Vader's glove and eventually unearthed it in the depths of Mon Cala. However, the prolonged wearing of the powerful dark side artifact did not go unnoticed for the 3-eyed one. Soon he noticed that his skin began to cover with ugly scars and ordered an exact replica of the glove to be made. What happened to the original is unknown even to the celestial beings. However, according to unverified information, after some time it fell into the hands of false prophets, and through the bargain-loving Raja Ubuki, straight to the Dark Lady Lumia. Meanwhile, the spies of the false Kadan discovered that the true 3-eyed son of the Emperor had long been quite very dead, having been killed because of his madness. When Trioculus arrived at the Scardia space station with Hissa and accompanying faces, the bearded priests warmly welcomed the new Emperor. However, as soon as the leaders of the prophets and the Central Committee were left alone, the false Kadan accused the guests of self-proclaimed gross falsification of the Emperor's lineage and the murder of the true heir of Palpatine. Hissa reassured Kadan that the true 3-eyed son is alive and well, sitting in a solitary cell, muttering incoherent nonsense, and that Trioculus is an ideal candidate for the role of leader, capable of keeping the willful Grand Moff Brotherhood in check. The prophet softened and granted the colorful pair a dark blessing combined with a new prophecy. It turns out, the one who can challenge the absolute power of the new Emperor is a Prince Jedi from the lost city of the Jedi on Yavin 4. What Ubuki took before the reception of the esteemed guests is unknown, but the impostor and his smiling comrades swallowed the bait very quickly. On the 4th moon of Yavin, Trioculus searched the entire planet for the dreadful Prince Jedi. Only by a miracle did he not stumble upon the benevolent ghost in the person of Exar Kun. However, the pesky Luke Skywalker abducted the mysterious boy named Ken, who had been living in the ruins of one of the Massassi temples before him. Trioculus and Hissa made many efforts to capture or destroy the poor boy, and eventually chased him down in Cloud City on Bespin. Alas, the great heir of His Majesty the Emperor ended up being absurdly captured by the fat-bodied Papa Jabba the Hutt Zorba, while Ken managed to escape in time. By this moment, Jedi Knight Dan had already become disillusioned with working with Trioculus and his buffoons from the Central Committee of Grand Moffs. Skillfully playing along with the three-eyed nincompoop, naive as a child, he was quietly preparing a quick and decisive coup d'etat against the king without a kingdom. Amid the applause of his loyal companions in the acting craft, the false magician announced the excommunication of Trioculus and elected himself as the new head of the Galactic Empire. Emissaries of the Church of the Dark Side contacted Zorba and agreed on the transfer of the frozen carbonite body of Trioculus to prophets. However, the agents of Grand Moff Hissa proved to be a bit swifter. In a swift operation, the slab with the body of the dear and beloved leader was snatched from the slimy hands of the vile Hutt. Soon, the prophets, led by the false Jetgar, lured the Imperials into a trap, forcing them to recognize Kadan as the new emperor, and destroyed the carbonite slab, which, in truth, had nothing to recognize. The real Trioculus, meanwhile, was peacefully asleep in carbonite aboard the personal yacht of Hutt Zorba heading for Tatooine. After dealing with the false emperor, the closest aide of the Supreme Prophet set out with the intention to lay his hands on the resources of this planet. His schemes turned into a disgraceful defeat. The forces of the New Republic, with the support of Ken and the freed Triclops, put the prophets and their allies to flight. Meanwhile, Kadan intended to eliminate the potential threat posed by the Central Committee, but the Grand Moffs managed to escape from the space station of the Church of the Dark Side before the order for their liquidation was signed. In Tatooine's orbit, the exiled governors intercepted Zorba the Hutt's yacht and boarded it, surprisingly discovering Trioculus on board the Hutt's ship. The bearded slug was thrown straight into the hungry maw of the Sarlacc, but for some unknown reason, the Great Devourer found the old bandit to be unappealing. Thus, by the next night, the Tatooine Gulper spat him out. The much-suffering Hutt was picked up by compassionate Jawas, and soon he flew off to complain about his woes to the prophets. However, the execution of the elderly Hutt became the last success in the life of Emperor Trioculus. After some time, the heir to the Empire was eliminated by the special services of the New Republic, and the information obtained from Zorba allowed the imposter Kadan to once again capture the committee leaders and subject them to trial for treason. Having been in the skillful hands of the Dayful torture master Defin, the Grand Moffs, except for Bertroff Hissa, quickly confessed to all possible sins. Thistleborn received 3 years of hard labor on the scorching Dunhausen, 4 years in Aldahota, Maza 5 years of exile on the mortally inhospitable Arzid. The prophet sentenced Grand Moff Hissa to ultimate submission through execution. The trial of the former Grand Moffs mysteriously coincided with the news of the discovery of the lost city of the Jedi, which had become the headquarters of Spin, one of the New Republic's intelligence departments. The news came from a rather unexpected source, an implant in the head of the newly affiliated New Republic member Triclops, who unwittingly recorded and sent the location coordinates to the prophets. The self-proclaimed Kadan and Jedgar decided to escort the Grand Moff Mesa, who was sentenced to a slow and terrible death, to Arzid, where they unexpectedly encountered Skywalker and Ken. Stormtroopers captured the young Jedi Knight and his companion. The head of the church hoped to personally interrogate them and, if possible, bring them to his side, promising to soon reveal to Ken the truth about his parents. Upon arriving at the fourth moon, the false Kadan barely avoided a carefully set trap by the Republicans. He realized that the information received from Triclops was nothing more than a vile deceit. Threatening the murder of Skywalker, he forced Ken to take him further into the depths of the lava caves, sending the Jedi himself to the surface under guard. Ultimately, the group of tourists reached their goal, the central computer base of the lost city, capable of shedding light on many of the secrets of the Galactic Empire and the New Republic that had arisen from its wreckage. While studying the archives, the liar revealed the truth to Ken. His true parents were the Jedi girl Kendalina, who had escaped death during Order 66, and Triclops, the true son of the Emperor. Thus, Ken's loving grandfather was none other than Palpatine himself. The old swindler copied the information he was interested in and destroyed the computer center, but on his way back, he was blocked by none other than Luke Skywalker, wielding his lightsaber. the hero of the rebellion ordered Kadan to immediately release the boy and disappear somewhere far away. The Master of Disguises didn't really mind. Unfortunately, during his hasty escape, the deceitful cleric lost the hard-won files, and all the soldiers and prophets accompanying him ended up in the hands of the New Republic. The triumph of the fake Kadan was as short-lived as his height, as was his intelligence, essentially. The Master of Fates, the patriarch of the most powerful religion in the galaxy and the potential emperor of the galaxy, received unpleasant news on his way home to the Scardia space station. Izan Issa had issued a decree on freedom of religion, putting an end to the spiritual dictatorship of the dark side church and marking the downfall of the self-proclaimed prophet's power. However, real fear with a capital F was still to come. Upon arriving at Scardia, the false Kadan, also known as Raja Ubuki, witnessed a truly horrific scene. The corridors of the station were literally filled with the mutilated dead bodies of his fellow adherents. The Supreme Prophet had no idea that during his absence Scardia had been visited by the dashing corsair, a collector of rare treasures and cosplayer of the great pirates of antiquity, Admiral Troyton Teradoc. However, he limited himself to simple old-fashioned looting. The next pilgrim of the Holy Temple, though, was none other than the grim Grand Admiral Ishin Ilraz, renowned for his ferocious hatred of the dark side prophets. For many years he had awaited the moment when he could settle scores with these repulsive old men in shimmering robes, and now Her Imperial Majesty had entrusted him with the task of eliminating the cult that had become a threat to the Galactic Empire. The Grand Admiral was surely overjoyed, perhaps even doing a tap dance in the company of the Dark Warrior Azrakal as they arrived on Scardia, literally drowning it in blood. When the terror-stricken little being, having instantly forgotten his former pride, sobbed and pleaded for mercy, the weeping responded with laughter over the comms and obliterated the space station with turbo-laser fire. Such marked the end of the smug fools from the Church of the Dark Side, but the dawn of true prophets. Meanwhile, a true vision opened to the real Kadan about the Valley of the Jedi and the power hidden within its depths. With his help, the prophets of the dark side could emerge from the shadows and settle scores with all their enemies, reshaping the future of the galaxy to favor the dark force. Emissaries of the Supreme Prophet enlisted the support of Jerek, the Grand Inquisitor of Justice in the Pentastar Alignment, a potent imperial remnant under the rule of Grand Moff Ardus Kane. Jerek, who had once been a Jedi archaeologist in a distant past, seemed a perfect candidate to lead the expedition. What the prophets did not realize was the cunning of their former student. The vainglorious Inquisitor had arranged the search for the valley and its funding with both the Order and the Commonwealth, and even with Agent Blackhole acting on behalf of the living healthy Emperor. However, this time the holographic persona of the Black Hole was actually Sate Pestage, while the true Agent Konal had completely descended into madness after the catastrophe that struck him on Mindor, turning his body into a monstrous amalgam of living metal and flesh. Yet Jerek remained loyal only to his bald self, hoping to not only gain the power of the Valley of the Jedi, but also to crush all his benefactors and rule the galaxy alone. This ambitious plan of the Grand Inquisitor and his brethren was brought to an end by the self-taught Kyle Katarn. Jerek found the Valley of the Jedi but was unable to wield its power. Katarn destroyed the followers of the Dark Blind, including the former prophetess Saris and the outright insane Twi'lek Bokka Sekka, and ultimately defeated Jerek in a glorious battle. The Grand Inquisitor's downfall marked the beginning of the end for the dark side prophets. The last invisible threads to the elusive dream of returning to galactic power were severed by the blazing blade of the young defender of the light. The prophets vainly sought even the slightest glimmer of fortune or opportunity in their grim visions of the future, but found none. Ultimately, the prophets of the dark side were undone by an anonymous tip about the location of their citadel, which fell into the hands of the dark warrior Azrakal. Acting with methodical ruthlessness, the former student of Kadan finally dealt with his master and many of his followers, until he himself was slain by the surviving prophets. Soon after, the Dark Lady Lumia and her apprentice Kana Jax destroyed the remnants of the cult and seized the invaluable legacy of the ancient Sith Lords. 6 years after the Battle of Endor, Kadan discovered the coordinates of Dromund Kaas and embarked on a perilous journey to the heart of the ancient Sith Empire. Though the prophets were dead, the darkness of this shadowy world did not disappear, and the hero of the New Republic fell under the influence of the dark side. Only through the timely assistance of Mara Jades was he able to return to the bright new order of the Jedi. Reckoning, all possible efforts had to be made to ensure that the information about the location of Dromund Kaas and the very fact of the existence of this world remained forever a secret to potential adepts of the dark side. The death of the mad Lord Konal on Ando Prime in 15 years after the Battle of Yavin put a definitive end to the centuries-long history of the Order of the Prophets. For nearly a millennium, the prophets of the dark side had been gathering knowledge about the nature of darkness and its power, about the history of ancient Sith civilizations and individual Dark Lords, and about the remarkable abilities doomed to be lost in the hands of the heirs of the Rule of Two. The Prophet's contribution to preserving the unique heritage of Sith culture is truly difficult to overestimate, but their attempt to interfere in major politics, as well as their confrontation with an emperor used to seeing only slaves around him, resulted in their downfall and ultimately their terrible demise.